We're going to talk about invasive mycology in Hawaii. And when we shift to talking about Hawaii, I want the tone of how we're interacting to be notably different. If you're a person who lives here and sees these mushrooms, you know things that we all want to hear. So if you have some tidbit, you've seen one of the mushrooms that I am saying is non-native or invasive on a native plant maybe, or you can remember when it wasn't there. That's the kind of stuff I want y'all to share. So I'll be asking questions, and for people who have life experience and history here, I want to encourage that to be shared. I have done some teaching, some research, field work in the private sector, and I'm a master's student at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse right now under Todd Osmondson. And yeah, done work in Guyana, done work in Washington State, traveled around, and I'm really happy to be here in Hawaii. There's a big need for mycology in Hawaii. You can find the most brilliant botanists and ask them simple questions about mushrooms, and it seems that that knowledge hasn't really seeped into the cultural understanding. So when you're thinking about this event, have that in mind. Like, this is an event generating a bunch of information for a field that sorely needs it in Hawaii. So I want to clarify the terms that we're going to be talking about. We're talking about species that arrived from somewhere else, and there are invasive species, and there are ones that are simply considered non-native. So species that arrive from somewhere else and aren't really out-competing, they aren't really disrupting the ecosystem. Maybe they're sticking into the wood chips and they're not crawling into the native forests. We'd consider that more non-native. And non-native species can also be invasive. So if they are non-native and they are doing those other things, we talk about them as invasive. Some examples of what I consider non-native are Amanita marmorata. It's a poisonous Amanita species here. And many of the stinkhorns I would consider non-native. They're not really aggressively spreading, but as we'll get into, it's hard to tell the difference with fungi between non-native and invasive. It's very tricky. Other things to keep in mind with non-natives, they might be single species associates. They could be a fungus that associates just with one plant. So yes, it may have spread to Hawaii, but it's only going to stick to a single plant species. That might make it something that's could continue to be considered just non-native and not invasive. Another example is Buckwaldoboletus xyrophyllum, which is a species here found in composting and on Araucaria, so far as I've seen and seen pictures of. And it's a bolete that kind of tastes sour when you're chewing it in the field for a taste test, but you can cook off some of those flavors. It's commonly cultivated in China. So that's one here. If you're an adventurous mycology eater, learn to identify, talk to people, put it online, cook it, and give it a whirl. Commonly eaten in China. So again, invasive species are ones that are out competing, and there's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum of interactions. Even native species can have invasive tendencies. That's a hard thing to understand. There could be an insect that, due to a change in climate, it now has two breeding events in 1 year, and now it spreads and outcompetes. So there can be instances where native species have invasive tendencies. With mushrooms, we really only see, we're at the point where we're just classifying the most extreme examples. There's a bunch of gray areas, and we're just kind of chipping away at the ones that are the most obviously invasive. Amanita phalloides, the classic death cap, has spread from its European range to all over the West Coast and Midwest, I believe, as well. And the concern is that it's actually starting to grow with native tree species other than its original host, so it may be outcompeting native fungi that were associated with them. And then we have rod, which we'll talk about at the end. If you are walking on a trail and you have a vantage point where you can see the top, the canopies of an ohi'a forest, look out for ohi'a trees that are fully barren. Any other signs of rod? Haley, how about any other signs of rod that you see walking trails?
You can almost correlate a lot of cave damage. So if the soil around you is tilled up, you can almost likely guarantee that there's rod spores, but otherwise they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's why you really want to be able to like spray your shoes, just because the spores are going to be sprayed and like throughout all of the bouquet. There's a certain beetle that bores into the tree, and then the frax that comes out of that spreads in the wind, and that's how all the spores of the fungus kind of gets everywhere.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the interactions with the insects, but look for pig damage as well, disturbances. That's a way you can perhaps identify you're in a place with rod. But this is why we've had everyone spraying their shoes in their tackle boxes, and thank you for doing so. We don't want to be the people who make more of the beautiful trees here sick.
Thank you.
Yeah. So invasive mycology is a science in its infancy. It's full of tiny baby doctors trying to figure out how to walk, read, write, and spell. It really is a concept that's new. It's a newer concept in a lot of ways. There are plant pathogens that we've thought of as invasive for quite a while, but this field as a whole is taking off now, the last 20 years. And so these baby doctors are there, but there are also adult doctors and researchers to celebrate. My professor Todd has done some work on the golden oyster, which has spread through the Northeast. And Pringle has done a lot of work outlining how we can talk about invasive species, as well as some recent work on golden oyster and other work on the death cap, and I believe Amanita muscaria. And then Juliana Furci has done some work with Amanita muscaria, which we've seen here, the classic Mario mushroom, that has spread as well.
Do those grow in native trees or imported trees?
Here?
Yeah.
I think they're all imported trees. We don't have many ectomycorrhizal hosts.
Right.
Pisonia is one, but there's not many ectomycorrhizal hosts native to Hawaii. So why this field has taken so long to come into fruition, to come to be understood, is because it's really hard to talk about invasive fungi. We take for granted when we're thinking of mushrooms, these are things that a tiny fraction of their life we see them, you know? Imagine a librarian, and we just see them at the library. They've got their whole lives going on, and our whole concept of who they are is just built off of them at the library. That's how we interact with mushrooms in a huge way. Most of the time we don't know what they're doing or where they are. And so we can't see if one invasive fungus is outcompeting another with the naked eye. We need special tools. We need to look inside the logs and do DNA sequencing. Do we see other species disappear when one is here? On this trip, there is a mushroom we'll talk about later on. So far, macroscopically, we don't see native species fruiting with one of the invasives here in Hawaii. But we can't prove, scientifically we need proof, right? We're looking to back up that idea. We can't prove that things are being displaced with the naked eye very easily. So as I said, their lives are largely hidden. We need different methods to estimate the abundance of them. How abundant they are is not how often you see the mushroom, right? That's a misleading way of looking around. It can help you. It can help you find sites to study, but in a big way, that's not going to give you a scientific estimate of abundance. How they reproduce can be really cryptic and diverse. So in our fungal biology talk, we learned about spores landing and connecting and making a dikaryon. These words were introduced. There's some special fancy stuff that can also be done. That Amanita phalloides that we talked about, it can do something called unisexual reproduction. So it can bypass the need for opposite mating genes to make a mushroom. Essentially, a clonal version of a mushroom can happen. So their lifestyles are also a mystery. Parasexual mating is another way where you get some amount of genetic shuffling without true sex going on. I illustrate this just to make it clear, even academic mycologists go, okay, but do we really understand where this thing's moving around, how its genetics are being spread? The more we look, the more ways we find that genetics are shuffling around for these invasives. Dispersal. Talking about what is native to some place is really tricky with fungi. There's reports of spores from South Africa, same population of rust spores, landing and being found and germinating in Australia. And that's just natural wind currents carrying things around. So yes, we are moving things around, absolutely. There's some studies that illustrate the complexity of dispersal, I can point out there was a, I believe, 12-year longitudinal study on top of a volcano observatory, and they're seeing, do we see patterns of the spores and the fungi that we find in the air, because they're carried across oceans, fungi are, and can we correlate those patterns with weather events? Kind of figure out maybe where things are coming from. The answer was, it looked kind of just like noise. There's stuff coming. There are species arriving, but they couldn't really pick out a clear pattern. And not for lack of trying. These are brilliant people. So it's hard to know where things are coming from. One of the most beautiful, elegant scientific studies on dispersal in Hawaii was done by a mycologist named Gladys Baker, who at the airport swabbed a bunch of people's shoes and maybe some luggage too, and cultured, this was before DNA sequencing, cultured the spores and the fungi that were growing on their shoes. And she found over 60 species. Yeah.
She also swabbed people who came off the boat from the military as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, and she was looking at the ports of origin, where were they coming from. Long story short, you guys brought fungi here with you. Full stop, you did. It's just the microbial world is everywhere, and that's something we have to deal with. Yeah, in other places in the world, we could look at New Zealand. They make sure you don't bring muddy boots in, right? That's something we could consider, or at least bring into the conversation for Hawaii. Yeah, it's hard to know how things move around. They resemble microbes in a big way when it comes to dispersal. There are polypores that have been found drifting across the ocean and washing up on shores here. A lot of plants were brought over in little bits of mud on the feet of birds. 90% of the plant lineages came via bird dispersal. It's very likely fungi did too. It's hard to know. So how can we say what's invasive if we don't know how or when it got here? Yeah, native ranges are hard. Fungi move inside of plants. There's a study I read that noted invasive plants tend to bring more of their invasive fungal partners, which makes some sense. The inoculum, the amount of spores and a viable fungal material invasive plants bring with them tends to be higher. And if they're setting up their microbiome, right, they wear their microbiome outside in the soil in a big way. If they're setting it up for success to take over, they got to bring their fungi with them, right? So that makes sense. And the frameworks to study these things is just getting figured out. All in all, in painting a picture, it's an emerging science because it's difficult, and there's lots of different ways we have to think about it. This paper is a fantastic introduction to, if I've got the right one here. If this is the one I'm thinking of, it talks about how fungi can disturb plants in invasions in that nature. Really good one to read. So how do we know when a fungus is invasive if I just spent 10 minutes telling you it's really hard to know? There's simple ways. Your crops start becoming sick out of nowhere. If your plants, right out of the blue, start getting real sick, odds are something came and is causing them to be sick. It's a new organism. Could be bacterial, could be viral, or could be fungal. There is the coffee rust. Could we crack the door? Is anyone else hot? Yeah, let's do it. We can sacrifice a little bit of brightness for a little bit of comfort.
Yeah.
We all like it.
There's a fan back there.
Yeah, that fan is a beast. It makes noises. Okay, one way your plants start becoming sick. There are many incidences of invasive plant pathogens in Hawaii. Essentially, every time you bring a plant over to grow it somewhere, you're going to have fungi that come along and infect them. Some classic examples are the coffee rust, ash dieback disease, and cacao frosty pod rot. So in case you were wondering how these things are managed, when big shipments of fruit and things are moved across borders, there will be a USDA station and hopefully a mycologist there who's inspecting stuff. And a friend named Rue, who had this job in Florida, told me that if they find concerning things in a giant load of produce, they incinerate it. That's how serious they take this, They don't want to bring new pathogens in. Some examples of these, American chestnut blight, I believe it was introduced in a zoo. Anyone remember where the zoo was? The first chestnut blight? the Bronx Zoo in 1912 or something thereabout. And in a very short amount of time, a monodominant tree, a tree that took up a huge amount of space on the East Coast, disappeared. If you've never seen pictures of ancient chestnut forests, you should look at them. You know, there are these big pieces of our ecosystems that are missing, and we need to talk about them or else we forget that they're gone. They are gone, by and large, because of Cryphonectria parasitica, a fungus that our American chestnut had no innate resistances to, or very little. They're finding some populations have resistances to them. And it took just about 50 years for these forests to be gone. One difference is some plants get killed completely by invasive fungi. The American chestnut, they die back, become shrubs, and their roots survive. So they're still there in some form. Yeah.
I saw like a YouTube video about that. It just showed there were these like little twiggy things. They just kept growing and dying back. But then there were actually a few trees, a few scattered individuals that were like completely immune, and they were just growing like massive trees standing alone, growing chestnuts on them.
Yeah.
That were totally immune to it.
Absolutely. And there's efforts. So there's some innate immunity, and then there's efforts to interbreed with the Japanese or Asian species of chestnut, trying to get some robust genetics. You know, we see this isolation from pathogens. People who lived and have genetics from island populations had less resistances to coronaviruses years ago. So it's not unique to plants and fungi. This is a thing. If you're not exposed to pathogens over time, you're more susceptible to them. Ash dieback disease was another one that is ongoing. It's an issue in Europe. It's not yet a huge issue in North America. 70% of the ash trees in North America, though, are dying due to a beetle. But yeah, this fungus is killing things in Europe. Ours are in trouble due to a beetle. There are different stages of this fungus. And just to, again, illustrate how little we know, you know, all this money, all this effort studying ash dieback disease, but we know there are, at least in some members of Hymenocyphus, there are totally hidden other parts of their life cycle that we aren't even talking about. So even the most brilliant people might not know Hymenocyphus has a life cycle where it's in the rivers and streams at some point. It makes aquatic spores. We find them, we sequence them, we go, huh, that's a Hymenocyphus. But how does that play into the picture of maybe an invasive? We're not sure. Long story short, there's still basic facts about these invasive species that are so well studied that we don't have a grip on. If this species has an aquatic life cycle, nobody knows. Could be, very well could be. So we find out if something's invasive also, maybe if they come along with plants we move. So this kind of borders. There would be things that come along with plants that are just non-native, as I mentioned. There would be things that are invasive. Naive, non-native reforestation is a thing that we should be very wary of. If you hear people saying, this environment's messed up, we could fix it by planting a whole bunch of fungi or plants with specific fungi, or we could introduce fungi, we've learned this lesson. We've done this already. There's a thing called the precautionary principle. Be very skeptical if you're being greeted in your local communities by people who want to bring in new species to try and fix a problem we made. And there are terms to talk about how fungi are invasive, like in that paper I mentioned by Ann Pringle and others. They could displace native symbionts. They could cause alien plants. Alien plants could cause the local population of a native fungus to increase and then change other species. So we could bring in a plant, now a native mushroom has a whole bunch more host to hang out with, and it affects the ecosystem. So it's a dynamic picture. Some other examples, we've got the Amanita muscaria, which we've talked about. It's not native here, it was brought along with non-native hosts. It's spread with eucalyptus and pine plantations, and that's not necessarily a coincidence. The first efforts to grow pines abroad for timber, they had a really tough time until they realized we need to bring soil with them. We need to bring the soil, and for some reason, then the plants will grow. What they were doing is bringing fungi with them. They were bringing the symbionts. So a diverse array of hosts, and there is some evidence that it's naturalizing, which means it's growing with new hosts. So it's getting to a region and growing with their hosts. You can tell I worked really hard to draw this line. So please take this with a grain of salt. However, it is, I believe it has a native distribution here and not here. Pleurotus citrinopiliatus, the golden oyster. This is the most astounding example of an invasive mushroom that I've ever seen a culture embrace, seen the story unfold. The papers on this, while research came out about 10 years ago, the mycology as a whole became aware that this is an invasive species. New publications talking about it and studying if it's displacing other species just started to come out in the last year. Todd, what year did Andy and you start doing golden oyster stuff? 2017? Okay, so almost 10. That's wild. But yeah, it's something the mycology community knows. Yet you will see companies who could be named by people who want to make them more mad than I already have. You'll see companies selling these with boxes that say, spread this, spread the spore, literally, word for word. So putting commercials online showing you to plant it in your backyard. Would you ever think to release wild hogs in your backyard?
No.
No, that's a silly thing. It's laughable. Where we are with mycology and mushrooms, we don't know which ones are the wild hogs. We don't know. The public doesn't know. So we have to spread this idea that non-native oyster species shouldn't be moved around willy-nilly. Yeah, and it was spread by mushroom cultivation, by and large. That's what we believe. Native to Asia, moved around all over. Probably being sold here. Does anyone know? Is this sold on the islands?
No, actually, HDOA has, there's a approved list and a non-restricted and a restricted microorganisms list, and that particular species is on the restricted list.
Good. That's fantastic.
It's not, well, that doesn't stop people from ordering it and it's slipping through.
Okay.
And a lot of the bigger companies will ask for the permit, the HDOA permit.
Yeah.
But some of the smaller sellers on Etsy and whatnot don't ask for the permit.
Yeah, goofy.
So stuff
So
slips through.
we're really keen in our mycology. You know, it's kind of a free-loving community here. We walk around and look at the ground together and have some drinks, and it's a lot of positivity. We do have to be a little bit of adults in this room for everyone else, though. This is a dangerous thing to do. This can disrupt ecosystems. So while it's not pleasant, while it does involve cultivators' livelihoods, that's real, we have to talk about it. And I encourage you all to continue to do so after this. Another escaped mushroom, less invasive, more just has spread and naturalized, is the Shiitake. You can find sequences in soils and woods for the Shiitake from all over now. It's native to Asia. I saw a sequence, a high school or a college student swabbed the lining of their washer, like the little plastic lining to their washer dryer unit, and found some Shiitake as a sequence result. It's everywhere. And you might ask, well, it's edible, we like it, what's the problem? We have native species that are related that it could be taking the place of. Two of them exist that I'm going to talk about. There's Lentinula raphanica, not super tasty from what I understand, has a raffinous or like a radish, turnipy.
Well, people eat radishes, so why would they not eat this?
They're picky, I guess. Beats me. But this species has actually been assessed. I haven't followed up in a while, but it's estimated that it's going to lose a bunch of its habitat. And so in that setting, in that world where we know that this species is going to be losing habitat, we want to prevent the introduction of things that could be competing with it. Another native species is Lentinula boreana. I found this in Florida. It's apparently in Texas as well. This one you can eat, I believe. By that I mean I believe it tastes good. It's definitely edible. I believe it tastes good. But yeah, there are native counterparts. There are native oysters here in Hawaii that we could be displacing if we bring in other ones. Some invasive mushrooms where I'm from, Amanita phalloides has spread, and it's spread, this is not the right oak leaf. It's spread to our native Gary oak, which is an endangered tree. There's hardly any habitats left where Gary oak is out and about, and we've introduced a mushroom that can grow with it. We don't know the mushrooms that grow with it already, and we're putting an aggressive one there.
Could it be helpful to the tree then? I guess we don't know.
So the concept of it over time, that's a very complex question. If it's fulfilling a role with the tree, sure, it could be doing a similar job, but if it is out competing a bunch of other species, we do know that the more biodiverse, the more species there is in an ecosystem, the more resilient it is. So it might look superficially like it's not causing a lot of damage, it's just getting rid of some other species, but we don't know. In 100 years, it could be that ecosystem's more susceptible to drought now. That ecosystem's more susceptible to flooding. Certain things that it could tolerate before it couldn't. That's a jump, and I want to be totally scientifically clear. We don't know, but we do know that biodiverse ecosystems are more resilient. Here's the article talking about it. Moving over, it's very abundant. Something that I want to point out, we've heard the apple on a tree analogy. Mushrooms are like apple on a tree. Aaron's made a really good video talking about picking and plucking that I think this kind of came up in a while ago. There's some research on the population genetics of Amanita phalloides that suggests, this is a lot of words, it suggests it's made up of a bunch of little populations that depend on new mushrooms. And what Anne Pringle couched in the most careful scientific language is, if these populations are dependent on new mushrooms to keep spreading, hypothetically, if we pick all of the mushrooms every single time we see it for a long time, we could possibly make it mostly go away. We could get rid of these populations. If we find the immature mushrooms, pick them before they spread. So that analogy of apple on a tree, it falls short. We may be able to control spread of especially ectomycorrhizal, especially amanitas, that are invasive if we pick them all before they're allowed to sporulate. Genetics suggests this. In practice, we have not done this. But I want to open your minds up to that, because it's easy with mushrooms to go, well, what can we do? It's like an apple on a tree, nothing goes away. Not the case. It's more complex. So that analogy, it's very helpful for beginners to grasp the idea there's something bigger underneath the mushroom. But the oversimplification can be dangerous. It can be dangerous for conservation. There are other studies that talk about the effects of picking over time. And it's super case dependent. I mean, there's an interesting study for about 10 years on chanterelles that showed not much changed. There are studies on matsutake and different forest types. So it's not even just, do I pick matsutake and does it go away? You find out reading the papers, it's different forest types will have different responses. Matsutake grows in different aged forests in Japan versus the United States. So it's a complex picture. I just want to put this there to drill in again. Oversimplifications can be dangerous for conservation. Picking a mushroom, will it come back? Over 100 years if we pick it, will it come back? These things aren't things we can easily feel confident about. Personally, I am not comforted by a 10-year study. These forest ecosystems, they're 1,000-year-old trees, and we're looking at 10-year studies and saying we know. That's, it's good, we have an idea, but it's a little bit quick. Yeah.
You might want to look into the German studies on that, because Germany has and had for a long time very strict laws
On
about
boletes?
not picking endangered mushrooms,
Yeah.
and so they have said that for the longest time since I can remember. So.
Yeah, I'm aware of some stuff in the Black Forest on boletes. And I believe that stuff suggests a similar trend to abundance of boletes doesn't go away with picking.
No, it's the other way around. They have very strict laws against picking, because they do say
Oh.
it harms the organism if you pick in the minute they're red listed mushrooms.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to pick, you get fined if you pick them, and
Wow.
Netherlands the same.
Netherlands the
and
same?
in Austria they have also strict picking laws, and ever since I was a small child I've heard that,
Wow.
which is like 55 years ago.
Yeah.
Do not pick if you don't need it, because you're harming the organism. Don't step on the mycelium,
Yeah.
because you're harming the organism.
Yeah, that's good to know. Definitely something more to read. Another thought, if you are worried about conservation and fungi in this sense, more than picking has been shown to be a problem for many things. Trampling, raking, that does damage things. In my own limited years of experience, the only places I've seen chanterelles get totally chased out are where a bunch of people really excitedly walked around and stomped the ground down. So trampling definitely is a thing to keep in mind. Raking in Matsutake evidentiated that.
I guess there was a study where they put like plank walkways through the woods and picked all the fruiting bodies from the plank walkways, and then right there in the similar forest they trampled, and significantly less fruit bodies in the upcoming years from where it wasn't trampled.
Do you remember the species, or was it just general?
Canthorellus formosus.
Canthorellus?
Yeah.
Wow.
Did you say less fruiting bodies?
Where it was trampled,
Yeah.
that showed significant damage, so tread lightly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's easy to forget about these kinds of things with mushrooms because we don't hear them scream. We don't, a lot of the normal things that say we're harming a creature are absent. It's good to be mindful. So, talking about spread, talking about abundance. More examples. This is an invasive species not published in the literature, 100% appeared out of nowhere and has spread. And I was lucky enough to know a fella who documented some of the first patches, my old advisor Fred Rhodes. And things he noted right away is where it grows, it's extremely abundant. It persists when it dries out, so it can dry out and come back to life. There's a paper talking about in a climate change world, things getting warmer and drier, what trends do we expect to be favorable? And broad ability to decay things, being able to eat a bunch of different types of leaf litter, that's one feature, very advantageous, and another is being able to come back after drought. Luckily in this instance, Fred helped me. Its invasion has a paper trail. Fred documented a patch at a park. First one he saw at this park that we'd foray twice a year, every year. And this is in '98, and it's a little bit on a hillside, pretty contained. What you can't see is there's mycelium that forms a mat. And this species can form a really dense mat. You pick it up, it can pull up like pulling up a rug on the ground, a big thing of mycelium. Fred came back in 2004 and noted that the entire area, hillside, so our last picture was just like this. Now we're out here. 2013, it's just in the entirety of the woods behind that area. It's the entire chunk of the park is now filled with this fungus. From my personal experience, and this is not scientific proof, but anecdotally, you see less of other things when you see this on the ground in the woods. Connor, would you agree or disagree?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think generally in my experience, just the density of the mycelium makes it harder for things to grow.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know for sure, isn't it? But
Yeah.
definitely dominant in seasons where other mushrooms are not normally fruiting. So it's very common in summer. In summer in the Pacific Northwest, you don't see abundance of other mushrooms. This thing is really resilient.
Yeah. Amy?
So I was just looking at our numbers from OPFF last year, and so we did this survey 2 years in a row. In 2024, we didn't see it at all. And this year, it was the 12th most abundant mushroom we documented.
Wow. So,
And that's anecdotal.
yeah, and I noticed that for 2024 as well. I have a project where I document this. Something really weird, after we had really bad droughts in 2023, observations of this went way, way, way down, which doesn't follow what we understood about it being really drought tolerant. But that was definitely on iNaturalist a trend. It's interesting to hear y'all had the same story. This appeared in, my years are all jumped up now. It appeared in the 70s, I believe. A woman named Lorelei Norvell, an amazing mycologist, found it and was really frustrated over it and brought it to her advisor, Amirati. Were you in Amirati's lab, Amy?
He was on my committee, but he wasn't up here.
A member of Amy's committee. And they puzzled over it for 10 years. They didn't know what it was because it wasn't in any of our books, right? This is pre-internet. And then Lorelei, who is, trilingual, got a paper in German and found this mushroom listed in there, and it matched perfectly. And it took them 10 years. And then I talked to a bunch of other folks. It made it from Portland, Oregon to Vancouver, British Columbia in like 3 or 4 years, it spread up and down the entire way. That's what we currently think happened. Yeah, really spooky stuff. What it's doing to the environment, we don't know. Why do we care? It's important to remember, while we pick these fungi, they're food for bugs. In a big way, the base of the ecosystem, made up of all these springtails moving nutrients around, all these tiny insects, when we disrupt those interactions, who knows what could happen? I'm not saying I'm doomsday-ish about it. Maybe the bugs just hop to the new invasive mushroom. But it's important to think about not just the plants they're interacting with, but the insects that are feeding and dispersing these spores as well. A lot can change with an introduction. Long-term effects on forest health are unknown. Again, we're really tempted in science and conservation research, that 10-year study of chanterelles, which is fantastic. Really tempted to think in a human time span. It's a little silly. It's a little silly, right? If we're talking about organisms that can live hundreds and hundreds, 1,000 years, to look at something for 5 years and go, we've figured it out. So long-term effects of shifting biodiversity, we should err on the side of caution. Just in general, that's an opinion. That's an opinion.
Good one.
There are people who might know more who disagree. Yeah. So now we're moving to Hawaii, and I want stories, if anybody has them, whether it's a tree in your front lawn, whether it's something your auntie told you was here and appeared at some time. One that has a story in Hawaii is the ohi'a/guava rust, Ostropuxinia sidii. It was described off of guava in Brazil, and its first detection was in the Big Island. And it's really unusual. Rust fungi are these little plant pathogens, and they might hop from one host to another and back and forth, maybe 3, 4 hosts. It could have really complex life cycles. This one is known on 539 species. So it's a pretty odd rust, right? It's really not so picky on who it chooses to live with. In Hawaii, it's been most detrimental towards Eugenia kulauensis. Do you know the common name? Is it the Niau tree? Nioi tree, which now is, you would know more if this is current. Last I checked, nearly restricted to reproduction in nurseries.
It's a pretty rare plant in the wild to come across. Like, I think we only have maybe like 3 on island.
3 plants on island.
Yeah, it's found throughout Hawaii, but each island has their own like limited amount left. And rust is pretty predominant in like more lower, wet, warmer islands, but it can also be found on the up here as well.
Yeah. And that's something that's tricky with this rust. There's studies saying, well, okay, if we figure out where the rust spores are in the air, can we figure out where's going to get infected? What trees might be at risk? The answer is no. Places with high abundance of rust spores in the air might have lower amounts of infections underneath them. And then another area where there could be a lot of infections but less spores in the air. So this paints a picture of very complex interactions. Maybe the trees in one spot have other fungi helping them survive. Maybe they have some innate defenses in their genetics that other trees don't. But yes, the Eugenia kulauensis is nearly gone. 3 on island, that's shocking. Now we're going to talk about rot. Rapid Ohia death. There are 2 species of Ceratocystis, which are these darling little microfungi. A lot of them associate with beetles. Some of them are quite problematic when they're spread, as we learned with rot. So here we are. There are sightings of each of the 2 species, Ceratocystis leuco-ohia and Ceratocystis huliohia. Sightings in a diversity of places. There is a more aggressive leuco-ohia and a less aggressive huliohia, but they're still deadly. They have different patterns of how they infect things. And the first detections of rod were on 2014 on the Big Island. However, it was reported in 2010 by some landowners in the southeast side of the Big Island on Puna. Healthy trees can die within a few days to a few weeks, although I think this can be very variable from what I've heard. And in 2016, it was recognized as 2 distinct species. So take this into account. There was a time, a couple of years, where we knew this fungus was here, but we didn't have a name for it, right? This is something we've seen with other fungal pathogens that have spread. The one that had killed a bunch of bats in North America didn't have a name. We just knew it was there at first, and same story. And the names are Hawaiian. Huli Ohia changes the natural state of Ohia. Luku Ohia, destroyer of Ohia. And this was the first time Hawaiian names were given to plant pathogens, which is pretty wild. So it's been here for 12 years or 16 years, and it causes, Huli Ohia causes a canker beneath the bark. It spreads slowly through the tree and kills off localized areas which are conducting water, and it causes the tree to die. So it destroys the vascular system, essentially. Keeps water from moving around. And there's different spore types. There's different ways you can see it, little lines of pigment inside of a tree. This whole field of plant pathology is not my expertise. If there are people here who have seen rod or have pictures and you're really curious, we can have that powwow after this. But that's Huli Ohia. Under the scope, it's got multiple spore types, asexual and sexual propagules. So it's got a diversity of ways it can spread. Luku Ohia is the more aggressive of the two, causing a systemic wilt. It chokes off water and can cause the entirety of the crown, which is that top portion of the tree, right, to go brown almost simultaneously. And you'll see these little structures called cinemata, which are kind of tough. They look not so tough, but they're like strong little hairs with globules that contain spores. That's what you're looking at here.
That's on the outside of the bark?
I believe so.
Cool.
I believe so. In wounds. You'd see this like in the corners of wounds here is one spot. I've seen it on tiny chunks of wood on the power line trail, looking just like this. If you see it, don't touch it. Just leave it there. Just leave it there. Document it with a picture, but leave the wood there. This is a big reason we don't want people moving around Ohia wood in general. So on Hawaii, these are just some stats. I'll just talk about Kauai. Both strains are found, and they're actually species. Both species are found and have been detected. Molokai and Lanai. Do you know if this has changed? Last I checked, no detections of rod, which is cool. Do you know if that's changed? Okay. Yeah. I can read stuff online, but I'm coming to the place where people are doing the work, so that's why I'm tempted to ask. Some ways that they are working to contain pathogens and the spread of pathogens, the fences you see that keep out pigs and deer, it's known that the ungulates, these deer are helping spread rod. So fencing can help prevent that. Another insect, beetles, can spread things around. I have a slide on that in a moment, but there are lots of efforts. While you've walked around, you've driven by tons of hours of work trying to contain rod. So again, we appreciate you spraying your shoes. Digital mapping of rod is going on with helicopters. So all islands are flown completely twice a year, and then areas like Koke'e are flown every 3 months. There are more consistent flights, and these digital maps generate pictures of where dying trees and crowns are, and they can use that information to go to the ground, verify an infection, and then remove infected trees. What a job. That's someone's day job. So those beetles that Haley mentioned and we saw a little bit about, there are 4 species of beetle that aid in transmission. This whole family, the family of rod, rapid Ohia death, is known to have, many of them are known to have association with beetles. Not all, many of them. And so the beetles dig their way into the wood, and while they're doing so, they leave like little powder, and we call that powder, full of dung and all of the things they're interacting with, insect frass. That frass is blown around. And that's one of the biggest ways some researchers believe rod is being spread. These little bits of dust containing the spores moving around the islands. A researcher named Chase, who studies these fungi intimately, told me, looking at population genetics, everything points towards wind of the insect frass is the biggest spread. But there are other researchers who believe it's more directly the insects themselves, as well as ungulates, deer, humans. So there's kind of disagreements in that field, and some talk has been thrown around about having an online rod, like presentation compilation, So we'll, after this, if that's of interest to you, if that happens, we'll send an email out to people that were here. It would be with some really current researchers on this. They're all excited about it even if they disagree with each other. So that's good. Yeah, so dispersal of frass through wind. Two new articles that I wanted to share that I found before coming here. Previously we thought just the wood penetration was the main way of infection, but it was found that fine roots of ohia can be infected by leuco-ohia really successfully. So more than Julio-ohia, leuco-ohia was able to colonize these roots. How that translates to roots being infected spreading elsewhere, not totally clear, but it paints a picture of, well, we thought the pigs moving around were spreading it, but that didn't make too much sense unless they're scratching the trees. Maybe they're infecting the roots. That's a newer thought that could be drawn. However, it's important to note this experiment was done with detached roots in a lab, not living roots, so we don't necessarily know how different it might be. If the roots were living, would they pump the ohia up through the vascular system of the plant? Or pump the rod up through the vascular system of the plant? We don't know. Ceratocystidioceae is the family of rod of Ceratocystis, and I just want to show you how diverse this group is. Oh, am I going to? Yeah, I'll go back. Look at how many species. There's a ton of them. One of the more common or well-known ones is pineapple black rod. That's a relative of rod. Who'd have thought? So it's a very diverse group, and it makes it easy to understand that maybe when these Ceratocystis species got here, we didn't know what they were, because there's still a lot of work classifying species to be done in fungi. And just to drill back into Amy and Brian's talks, if we don't know the names of these things, we are way behind square one when it comes to controlling invasives. If a species arrives, we don't even know what it is. How are we going to start taking action against its
I
spread?
think I may have spotted the two ones on there.
Yeah, you might have. Let's give it a 1-2. I focus this for my bad eyeballs.
I think there's like 140 species.
140.
Yeah.
Hot dang. Yeah,
Yeah,
you got your Julio-ohia right here.
And leuco-ohia down there.
Good eyes, Tristan. All right.
Oh, to be young.
So again, they're a member of this family. The first of this family was to be described was Ceratocystis albofundus, and it was a eucalyptus or a acacia pathogen. And Ceratocystis has caused humans grief a lot of places around the world. Or rather, humans have done some silly things, moved a bunch of plants and soil around, and then this fungus just grew, and we caused ourselves grief. This is kind of a more esoteric or a more advanced piece of research to share, but I think it's kind of interesting. For those of us with a molecular or cellular biology background, go ahead and tune out my voice for a second and read. For those without, essentially, two different species of rod. But evidence suggests, their genetics suggests that when they're in a log together, they can share some of their genes. And some evidence has been found that Julio-ohia has transferred some genetic material to leuco-ohia over time. And the kind of genetic material is involved in mitochondria. What is the mitochondria? Do adults know this too? It's the powerhouse of the cell. Yeah.
Mitochondria have their own separate DNA.
Correct.
It's in a ring because mitochondria are derived from bacteria.
Right. So mitochondrial genomes are their own little pockets of genetics, and there's evidence that transfer between the species has gone on from Julio-ohia to leuco-ohia, and these transfers, the type of transfers they are, can affect how well they grow, can affect how virulent they might be. So it's a pretty important part of the picture. While we might not be able to get rid of rod, maybe we can focus on the variants that have more virulence when we identify them with this kind of science. That's a direction this could go in the future. And so those the mobile elements we're talking about are spams, these mobile elements and variants. The extra spam may be why we see hypovirulence, so less virulence. Pardon me, I misspoke. More of these spams can disrupt virulence. So if they have a whole bunch of these mobile elements, they might be bogged down and not growing as fast. So that might be why Ohia, I've got these backwards. Anyways, one of them's more virulent than the other, and it has less of these spams. That's the story. As you can tell, I read this paper at 1 a.m. before coming here. My flight was very soon thereafter. So 5 things you can do with rod. If it's absolutely scientifically really important, maybe take a tiny piece of bark, but just don't break off anything from live ohia. Don't create wounds. Unless a researcher and you have explicit permission, we don't have permission to be damaging live ohia, so please do not. Don't transport ohia and clean your boots. Don't transport them inter-island. Don't move the wood around. Clean your gear. This is huge. Clean your gear. There's studies that show the more business is done in a port. This is one study in New Zealand. The more business that's done in a port, the more likely there's going to be pathogens spreading out to the crops around it. So very rawly and really, more people moving in and out, more things moving in and out, the more likely we're going to see pathogens. So if you're going to participate in travel or have friends coming here, just talk to them about it. That's all we can do at this level, talk to them about it. Wash your tires. So we're moving. That's the rod session. Anyone have any comments, life experiences, seeing ohia trees that they love die or become sick?
Does anyone know of any suffering trees right here in Kokei that I could photograph the video?
We saw a bunch today on our hike.
Really?
Yeah. Ativai, are there sick trees nearby?
That's a good question because Spencer from KRCP, they have been out doing rod samplings.
Okay.
And they have multiple places that they've done. We were kind of worried about one tree in the back here, but he wasn't able to get to the rod sampling yet. But yeah, Spencer and his KRCP team has been out there, same as the KISS and forestry, but mostly with the Spencer and his team.
All right. Well, if we see him, we could ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What was you? Yeah.
I just have a question about the invasive mushrooms.
Yeah.
I'm not a scientist, so please don't judge me. But I know on Kauai that when visitors or people will feed the fish, it's really bad because what it means is only the aggressive fish will stay and the shy other fish, so it cuts down the biodiversity of fish population at a snorkel site.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, if there's could climate change be like the food that those invasive mushrooms are eating? Are they like the aggressive fish? Could climate change be making food? I don't know.
Yeah. Definitely species that aren't picky eaters are more likely to be found spreading in my very limited experience. But I don't know that we're at a place in invasive. I haven't read anything that gets at that level of behavioral differences between different populations. I think there are times. I'm hot. I'm gonna open this up.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Need a prop or something.
Oh, there's a little thing on the bottom there. You can let that down. I think there's instances where fungi can lose their ability to sexually reproduce and get fixed in a clonal population, and that clonal population, normally it might have reasons or it's not advantageous for them to destroy all their hosts, but they no longer have genetic recombination, so they're not, it gets stuck being really aggressive and virulent. I'm trying to remember which species that was with. It was ash dieback or something of the sort. Yeah, Chase.
So I have a question for you, and then I have a short anecdotal story hypothesis from another person.
Yeah.
The question is, have either of these species been seen documented, genetically sequenced anywhere outside of the Hawaiian archipelago?
I don't think so. I think the answer is no. And the reason they ascribe it to being from Asia is because the way when you make a phylogenetic tree with all those species of Ceratocystis, they tend to have close biogeographic like cousins, like ones that are related do tend to be from the same parts of the world, and these sister species to, or close sister species to Ohia and Ohia are of Asian origin.
Thank you. And then a good friend of mine has a native tree nursery here in Hawaii, and he goes to a lot of native conferences, and he heard a speaker say, so this is a little bit broken telephone.
Okay.
There might be some facts in here that got muddled. That there was a snail, native tree, endemic tree snail to Hawaii that was feeding off fungi, that it was their primary tree fungi, it was their primary source of food.
Yeah.
And that snail species went extinct. And the same time that that snail species went extinct, Rod went.
Yeah, I feel like Brian would be more knowledgeable about the nuances of this. There are tons of fungi that cover the leaves of Ohia. Different ones at the lowland, different ones at highland. And they're sometimes the leaves are like black, covered in these sooty molds, right? And snails do eat that stuff. And all these special snails to Hawaii definitely have interactions with fungi that are really important. Yeah.
We've lost a lot there.
And going extinct all the time.
But the implications, so far as I understand, last time I talked to someone about this was a snail guy at the Bishop Museum last year in the winter. I asked him if there's anybody really knows if that's a thing, like if the rod is related to the snails and the fungi. I don't think there's any science on it yet, but it seems like something worth studying for sure. Yeah.
So do we need to do anything when we prepare to leave Koki'i tomorrow in terms of cleaning our stuff, either before we go to other parts of Kauai or back to the mainland?
They're mostly concerned with going from rod-infected areas to not, or pardon me, yeah, rod-infected areas to not. But yeah, if you want to be on top of it, just sanitize your shoes, and if you have a knife that you were using, sanitize your knife with the ethanol that we were doing.
Bleach.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to talk about mushrooms for a little bit, and then that's it. It's hot in this room. We've been here a while. Thank you for listening.
I feel fine.
You feel fine?
Okay.
Who's hot? Anyone else hot? All right, we got about 1/3.
You're talking about temperature, right?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Alrighty.
And physical appearance.
Okay, invasive mushrooms. So I want to disclaim, I feel comfortable as a scientist saying something's invasive if it's well documented to have destroyed a bunch of stuff. However, if it has not destroyed a whole bunch of trees, but it's spread everywhere and it seems to be rapidly becoming the only thing you find, I'm going to use the word invasive for that here today. That's scientifically an immature way to use it. You have to prove that it has cause and effect. But I'm going to insert some opinions into this, and I want to make that totally clear. This one is pretty unambiguously invasive. This is the honey mushrooms, Armillaria species. They do a strange dance of getting around. Instead of just crawling through the soil or moving with their spores, they have a little subway system. They have these tubes called rhizomorphs that are essentially pipes. They are hollow pipes, and they pump themselves around to explore new habitats so they can colonize and move through an area really quickly. On the Big Island, they are very problematic around Mauna Kea and have caused a large amount of dieback of the mamane trees. Am I saying that correctly? If you see them, this is an example where, if at all you've been confused, what does iNaturalist, who cares? We're taking pictures. Anytime you document honey mushrooms and put it on iNaturalist in Hawaii, you're contributing to our understanding of something important. That's a good thing to do if you're hiking and you see these, you get to know them, take pictures, put them on iNat. That kind of data can affect where botanists, lots of Hawaiian botanists, use iNaturalists, go out and look for this stuff. So those black rhizomorphs, if you've ever seen them, they belong to the honey mushroom, almost always. Is there any big black rhizomorphs that aren't honey mushrooms?
No, I mean, raspberry stuff is never going to be that thick or usually that dark.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard those referred to as like bootlaces.
Yeah, they do kind of look like bootlaces. You got boots on.
And they're, I've heard that like they're very distinctly associated with like armillarias.
That's, yeah, we can usually tell. I just wasn't sure in Hawaii. Brian's done more work, so I was wondering if there's others. Ben, when was the last, you saw these recently, right?
I think it was a different species. They're more yellow.
The one you sent me was still in the genus, though.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. Where were you at?
That was in Hakalau.
Hakalau?
Like a national wildlife refuge.
And was it everywhere, or was it just like a
I
couple?
was finding it pretty regularly, yeah, pretty
Wow.
abundantly. I didn't look for any Risomorphs, I should have, because I didn't think it was Armillaria, because it was so much more yellow than what I've ever seen.
There's
But,
quite a bit of variation, and these guys can look really wonky.
yeah.
Rhizomorphs are a good idea feature. So, honey mushrooms.
Can't you eat those?
Yeah, you can. The stipes are kind of tough. You can like pickle them or brine them, but if you're gonna eat them, I would just cook the caps and cook them really, really well. Yeah. So far as I know, they're not. I've never heard anyone rant and rave about them, but they are edible.
I'm
Yeah.
from Canada, and Ukrainians like chew them up. That's the best. They love them. Yankees are called. They're the favorites. Yeah.
Slavs will be eating lots of mushrooms that we don't go crazy for.
For the rhizomorphs, can you assume that they're going to be on dead wood around the areas, or are they on like trees, or
They can be on wood running along logs on the ground. They can be up in trees. A lot of time, if bark falls off of a standing dead tree, is the easiest way to find them.
These ones eat live trees, right?
They attack the roots. They're a root parasite. Yeah. But they also decay the tree after it's dying. Yeah.
Is there also a regular looking mycelium and associated with that? Or
Yes.
Is it, okay, so it just kind of turns into that as the pipeline.
It's a specialized structure.
Okay.
So like.
It's not like all the mycelium looks like that.
Yeah. So almost all the time, fungi are this white mass, undifferentiated mycelium, and then they have a few exceptions. And one of those exceptions are rhizomorphs, differentiated tissue types.
I've heard that they can also form rhizomorphs that run through the upper canopy in tropical forests, like
I've
power
seen that with
lines.
marasmius. I have not seen that with, feasible, very feasible. That's wild. Okay, here's another. It's beautiful, it's small, but we're maybe we shouldn't be so happy about it. At least it's pretty, but this is a mushroom that has spread from, its first documentation was in Madagascar. Who knows if that's where it started though? Again, we're can't be entirely sure. It's spread across the globe. And while we don't have the total end proof, I think I've talked to a few of you about this. We can't prove that it's chasing out other fungi in the twigs and logs you're seeing it on here, but we do know it produces some crazy antifungal molecules. There you go. They're called strobilurins, and they have some pretty strong cytotoxic. They kill cells. They're really good at warding off fungi. It produces 4 different flavors of these molecules. And so if you see this on a stick, just in your own time here for the rest of the time you're in Hawaii, do you see other mushrooms on that stick? Just pay attention to that. You don't. You really don't. I personally haven't. It's something that, while the science can't prove, it's chasing out other things. Your senses are telling you, maybe that's something that is true. Who knows?
I think I may have. Didn't we see at some point a log, a pretty thick log, that had those and something else on it?
Yeah.
But they were kind of separated.
They were on different parts of the log.
Yes, different sides.
I bet you there was a little war zone, a battle zone where they were fighting each other.
Right.
That happens. It's real. The fungi fighting the logs. It's quiet war, but it's war nonetheless.
One of the dark fungi, are they do they compete at all?
I don't know anything about its chemical. The Fabulosa manipularis. Not sure about what chemicals it produces. It glows, but that one seems to be less aggressive. This one that's just anecdotal. This one has spread around the whole world. It's a big problem in Australia. It's just arrived in California in the last few years, and I believe it's in Europe as well. Microscopy crassa. I would not say this is invasive personally. I'd say it's non-native and it moves around pretty well, but it seems to be mostly limited to landscaping, lawns, man-made habitats. But it's jumbo. This here's a American inch ruler. You got a cluster. It's that big across.
I found it way bigger. I found it with a plate size and the stem like this. Like, I took it to a party.
Would you want to
passed it around and took pictures of it all night. It was
Would you want to share the cyanide note?
Oh, well, I mean, it does contain cyanide.
Yeah.
And we have somebody here who's very good at cooking it off and eating it anyways.
I like it.
But I always tell people don't eat it.
As I know, I have a really good sense of smell. I can absolutely detect cyanide, and I know to change the
It's
one
all a
that's
numbers
behind.
game. Some of us smoke cigarettes. It's all a numbers game, right?
Cassava has cyanide and it's a staple
Yeah.
food for millions of people for thousands
Check
of
it out,
years.
check
There
it
you
out,
go.
check it out. But
So it's pretty big.
I
There
don't
are
know.
some reports of some compounds, but people can either do your research, take the risks you want
That's
to
the
take.
one that most
in your
people
life.
send me pictures of and say, what is this?
Very common. Yeah,
Very
very
common.
common. So it was first reported in Kauai, and Don Hems said it was found in Kauai near Kalaheo, and around the National Tropical Botanic Garden at Lauai. And now it's all over the place. There you go. There's one. Here's another. Gymnopus spahio1. This looks different. This is one of these code names we're saying. It's temporary code name.
Because it hasn't been formally described.
It has not been formally described, and so we have sequenced this mushroom from a diversity of habitats. I've done some digging to try and see when the first records popped up. And first record I can find is from 2018. There are other peoples I've talked to who might know of earlier collections or earlier photographs, but so far, earliest is 2018 on the Big Island, on the west side of the Big Island. We don't know where it came from. We do know that it loves growing with native bryophytes and on the Hupu'u and Ohia. So it sends out these little cords, kind of like the armillaria, but different. Not a big black structure, these thin little white cords. And I have opened up logs and followed them. And they'll go 20 feet. They go very, very far. Who knows how far in reality? This mushroom tans, just like you and me. Fungi produce melanins in response to sunlight, believe it or not. And so you can see this one did not get any sun. This one got some. This one got a lot on the cap. And so it can be really tricky to identify for that reason. It's really amorphous. It's about yay big. There's some right here. It's in the dark, can't show you. One ID feature that's good are the presence of these little cords, as well as the striations, these lines on the cap, as well as if you taste it, after like 3-4 seconds, it's kind of bad. But not right away. It's bad after a little bit of time. So those are some features if you want to. And then again, tasting it is chew, spit. That's safe to do. I am hoping to describe this species. It's really wild to me that it is everywhere. Brian, when you did work here, did you see it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have it from the Kipuka.
Yeah.
Go back and check links to his collections, but I feel like there's a lot of it.
Yeah. And when the mushroom book we've all been looking at, they didn't know what it was. Just to frame of reference, one of the most common things, if not the most common thing you see in native forests now, and the people who wrote the guidebook went, wow, we've never seen that. So that's how quick things can spread. There are some other mushroom introductions. The stinkhorn that we've been seeing, which had been called Acerorupa, but is actually Clathris archeri. It arrived sometime around 1973. That's Gladys Baker wrote that in a paper. Favelastia manipularis, this wonderful glowing thing. I don't know when it arrived. I could try and find it out, but I really don't.
It was 2007. No, they back. When I updated 2013, so 2012, from the monastery here on Kauai. Was the first report.
So that's why at first the reports were all the western side of the archipelago?
Yeah, I think so.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Rhodocalibia lalaha, I'm going out, this is kind of being asserted here and now, after I got Brian to say that sounds like probably it's true. I believe this was introduced sometime after 1985 and before 1981. I don't think it's native. I think it's a relative, it's in the same family as this, and it grows on a bunch of hosts. I've seen it on non-native stuff as well as native stuff. And the reason I think it was introduced after this time is there was a really good paper that came out in 1985, and he didn't ever see it. This guy found tiny white dots on leaves, but he didn't see this big thing, which leads me to believe it probably wasn't here. That's the kind of just the deductive reasoning we can apply, otherwise we don't really know. And then there's a paper that, if this is a topic of interest to you, there's a very nice little fungi magazine paper that Don and Brian and Dennis, I believe, wrote.
Jeff?
That you can check out on online. It's a 2018 publication. Just talks about the stories of these, a little more of the stories. So, how can we prevent more invasive fungi when arriving in Hawaii? This is dream world. I know this is dream world, but if you work here or you talk to people here, this seems to me like the biggest no-brainer. Right now, what I see when we walk to the sterilizing stations are a bunch of fungal spores that we're asking everyone to wipe their feet on. You know, it's a good idea for plant seeds. I think it's a bad idea for fungal spores. So if there's a way that we could have those stations be sterilized on their own every day, whether they go into a little wash box, like a little retractable thing, you know, there's $250,000 spent on conservation in Hawaii every year. I think we could convince some people to do this.
They have,
They normally put the spray bottles, but people jack them all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, so the spray bottle is for the feet washing station down
and then
below.
You're supposed to spray your shoes and then do the station. So it's
Mm.
but yeah, people take the bottles.
So there's an effort. I would like a fancy robot. That's what I would like.
I was just gonna say, to protect the bats from the white nose disease that spreads
Yeah.
among bats. In Mexico, they had us walk on a disinfectant mat before
Entering
swimming.
caves.
Yeah, before swimming in a cenote.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was just like it was like about an inch deep, and we just had to walk through this little disinfectant.
That's a good way to do it. That's Geomyces destructans, I think, is this white-nosed bat fungus.
Pseudogymnoascus.
It's got renamed. Pseudogymnoascus destructans. But the renaming happened maybe when I was like 10 or something. I have no reason to have that wrong. Yeah, and they finally pinned down, I think it came from certain caves in Europe.
They also found it in Ötzi's belly, I guess. Yeah.
In what?
The mummy man. The Austrian mummy man, the mushroom mummy.
Oh,
That one's just to illustrate how delicate of a balance introducing fungi into a new ecology can be. It doesn't kill the bats. It just makes them itchy.
Yeah.
That's all. It gives them a little itch, and that's enough to wake them up in their sleep when they need to be hibernating, make them want to fly around, burn all their energy before it's time for them to leave hibernation. So that's how delicate this world is in some ways. Okay, back to the story. Stricter requirements for boot and clothing cleanliness for visitors. This is something that would probably be very unpopular, would probably take a lot of legislature, and tourism boards would be against it. It would make things better. If we had a stricter policy, you can't bring muddy shoes into here or we'll take them and burn them. You know, you can't bring a muddy rain jacket, that kind of thing. Just 1 minute. That kind of thing would be really helpful, and it's already in place in New Zealand. That paper I mentioned that showed that ports that grow in their size bring more pathogens, they noticed that when they implemented these controls at the airports, that number started to taper off. So there's evidence to believe it could work. Dresden, yeah.
You know, if people can put up with airport security, they could probably put up with some, like, feet washing.
God bless it.
When you put your shoes up on the tray, just have disinfectant in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's that simple.
Homeland Security hiring right now. Over there.
Yeah, in this room though, take the extra time. Just take the extra time. Tell the people you're traveling with to take the extra time. That's something you can do personally. If we're growing mushrooms on the island, utilize species that grow here. This is one place in the world where I am just feel like, pardon the language, I feel like a hard ass, but we don't need to do it here. We're growing non-native stuffs everywhere else in the world. Hawaii's so special, so at risk. Why do we have to do that here as well? Yes, people want to eat fancy mushrooms, but it's not worth it. It's just not, you know, in my opinion. And I know there's money and livelihoods, all these things, and I don't make a lot of friends saying that, but it just feels like, why are we considering it, you know? Why? It doesn't make sense. If you do have friends growing mushrooms, and that's okay, I'm not going to be angry at them as people, I might just cringe internally. Make sure they don't compost the leftover spawn. Make sure that doesn't go into their normal compost bins. Keep that out of that waste stream that goes back into being used. If you cultivate outdoors, just maybe don't do it. And if you're going to do it, cultivate the native stuff. Do not plant non-native pleurotus or lion's mane or Ganoderma. Yeah, Chase.
Thank you for saying all that. I agree 100%. And I'm not going to name any names, but all the farmers I know in Hawaii, all the mushroom farmers that I know personally, the ones that are cultivating indoors have big fans in their fruiting chambers that blow the spores outdoors.
Yeah.
And they're surrounded by native forests.
No HEPA filters?
There's not on the out fan.
Okay.
No, not a helper filter on the out fan, no.
I don't know.
And then that's one point. And then I've tried so hard with all of these people. I mean, even bringing contracts to them saying, hey, can we culture a local pleurotus, because we have 2, maybe 3 species that grow here, naturalized, maybe native, I don't know. And I'm open to anybody's thoughts on this, on how to convince these people, because I've tried so hard for so many years. I hear the same thing. One thing I heard is like, I don't deal with novelty strains. And one thing I realized, I don't want to say in their defense, but putting on their goggles, is that they're looking for cultivars, varietals that perform well in an indoor environment. So
Absolutely.
They buy these developed strains from big vendors that have, and
It's
they
a matter
import
of
them,
losing
and
money.
they're legal to import from
Yeah.
HDOA and stuff like that. And then anything else they don't want to mess with because it's not a proven strain. It's like, why would I waste my time? Why would I waste my money?
We have
I've
to
tried
talk to
so
them
hard.
very bluntly. Cultivate. You get to choose between profit or morals. That's what it is. You get to choose between making more money and knowing you can, or doing something that's going to make you less money, potentially. You have to figure it out, but we know we're doing right by the land. That's what it comes down to. We know how humans tend to choose in that situation a lot of the time. Not the best of ways. Talking about it. And people here, if you like mushrooms, it's a part of your life enough to where you came here, you got people in your life texting you about mushrooms or nature. If there's this conversation about cultivation, insert this idea into that conversation. While that doesn't seem that powerful, if we all have 10 people in a year who we talk to it about, it becomes a topic in our community. That's where we're at now. We just need to keep talking and talking and talking about it. Yeah, Chase, do you have?
No, thank you. Thank you for saying it.
So is that kind of like a similar thing then on the mainland then? Like that idea, like.
Yeah, I feel really strongly about Hawaii because of how much it's already gone through and is going through. Yeah, on the mainland it's pretty similar. It's more specifically, like, the one that gets me is the golden oyster. It's not yet spread to the West Coast. It's being sold on the West Coast.
Is it here?
Not here, not yet, no. Yeah.
But like another oyster could just turn into that or something?
There's naturalized Pleurotus ostriatus in the woods in Washington, where I'm from, but it doesn't seem to totally outcompete the native stuff. I still see the native stuff a lot. Yeah.
I think it's getting to the point where people are adequately shaming people that grow golden oysters, that I think it's getting to be sort of an uncoverable position to be someone who sells golden oysters.
Absolutely. If you see North Spore, tiny actions you can do. Go to North Spore's website or mushroom growers that sell them, give them bad reviews and write why. People read that stuff. Go to their comments on their social media. Tell them, I don't think this is right. You know what they do? They hide your comments. If you're not doing something wrong, why are you hiding my comments? Yeah.
So if we vote with our dollars, what would be some good mushrooms for us to buy and export?
Chase, do you know?
Thank you. Just give me a second to think.
I want to get through this.
Okay,
could
yeah,
you
go
answer,
ahead. We'll
could
talk
you answer
later
that?
after, but I don't wanna
if anyone
interrupt.
wants to
So
know
yeah, I
that.
got some thoughts for that.
That's the scoop. Thank you for listening.
All right.